Welcome to the channel. The moon was explored by astronauts, but then the research was halted, and hidden data about strange things on its surface was leaked. It has been nearly half a century since human footsteps last pressed into the dust of the moon. December 1972, the end of Apollo 17. 3 men returned from humanity's greatest frontier and the world simply stopped looking upward. Officially, the reason was mundane: budget cuts, politics, a weary public. But for some, that explanation never quite settled. How could the species that had conquered the void suddenly turn its back on the stars? There are whispers, buried beneath decades of silence, that something else happened up there, something NASA could never explain, and would never allow the world to see. In the years following Apollo 17, classified memos, intercepted transmissions, and the accounts of a few men who dared to speak suggested that our first steps on another world might not have been as lonely as we thought. The Apollo missions were, by every measure, miracles of engineering. Between 1969 and 1972, 12 Americans walked on the lunar surface. They planted flags, collected rocks, and spoke words that would echo through generations. Yet, after just 6 missions, the project ended abruptly. 3 planned flights, Apollo 18, 19, and 20, were quietly cancelled. The explanation given at the time was simple: the cost was too great. But as one congressional report noted, NASA's annual budget was still smaller than the U.S. military's coffee expenditure. Money was a reason, but not the reason. Behind the curtain, something else was unfolding. In the decades that followed, a handful of researchers began connecting fragments, discarded transcripts, silent stretches in radio logs, erased footage. What emerged was a picture both fascinating and terrifying: a hidden struggle between mankind's ambition and something ancient, something that had been watching. Whistleblowers told stories of tracks that weren't ours, of lights moving against the stars, and of transmissions cut short the moment an astronaut began to describe what he saw. There were photographs, grainy, poorly lit, but unsettling. Strange, geometric shadows stretching across crater rims. Tower-like structures standing where no mountain should exist. NASA dismissed them all. Artifacts, they said. Tricks of light and shadow. But even light can hide the truth. In 2015, a curious post surfaced on Reddit. Its author claimed to be a retired British psychologist who had once been asked to debrief astronauts after classified lunar operations. The message was written calmly, methodically, with no trace of sensationalism. According to him, Apollo 17 was not the last mission. There were others, silent, secret, and never recorded in the public archives. He wrote that when the crew of Apollo 17 ventured beyond their planned landing zone, they came across something impossible: the wreckage of another craft. Not American. Not listed. Its insignia bore the faded star of the Soviet Union. Inside, he said, were bodies. Not decompressed, not burned, mauled. The metal was torn open from the outside, the helmets shattered identically, as though by enormous pressure or deliberate violence. When the Americans radioed Houston, they were told to remain on the surface. Technical delays, they were told. But as the hours passed, their voices grew panicked. They claimed to see movement along the lunar hills. Dark, shifting figures, approaching the module. Then, static. What happened next remains locked away, the transmissions allegedly erased or sealed under military classification. After that, the world moved on. The Apollo program faded into textbooks. But deep within the archives, something lingered, a silence too deliberate to be accidental. The moon, so close, so familiar in our night sky, had become once again a place of mystery. And if the whispers are true, it may also be a warning. Because according to the fragments that survive, the final message from the Apollo 17 crew, before the channel went dark, was short, broken by static, and chillingly human. "They're not supposed to be here." The world believed Apollo 17 was the end, but it wasn't. Somewhere behind the curtains of history, deep within NASA's black-budget corridors, something else took shape, a continuation no one dared to announce. In late 1973, only a year after Eugene Cernan's final footprints, a classified division was quietly formed, Project Selene. It never appeared in the public archives, and no NASA press release ever mentioned it. Its goal: officially, long-term lunar reconnaissance. Unofficially, verification of anomalous activity near previous landing sites. What anomalous activity meant, nobody outside that inner circle was ever told. Documents that leaked decades later hinted at missions labeled Apollo 18, Apollo 19, and Apollo 20, flights that supposedly never existed. Yet, fragments of telemetry, strange data entries, and missing mission patches tell a different story. In 1974, a U.S. Navy tracking station in Guam recorded unidentified transmissions originating from lunar orbit. They were coded, short, and repeated every 11 minutes. The call sign was unfamiliar, Luna 12. But the Soviets denied any active mission at that time. When independent operators tried to triangulate the source, they found nothing. The signals simply vanished, as if they had never existed at all. Whistleblowers later claimed that Apollo 18, if it truly launched, never returned. The few pages of alleged transcripts describe metallic sounds beneath the surface, artificial echoes, and moving light sources in the distance. One engineer, known only as M.R., recalled seeing photographs of what looked like an enormous dome rising out of the shadowed craters. He said its walls shimmered like glass, but were fractured, as if something had once broken through from below. Even stranger were the seismic readings. When Apollo 12's ascent stage was deliberately crashed onto the moon, sensors recorded the entire body vibrating, ringing like a bell, scientists said. But the echoes lasted for over an hour. One geophysicist whispered later, "That doesn't happen with solid rock. It happens with hollow structures." Could it be that the moon itself is not what it seems? The trail didn't end there. In 1989, during the final years of the Cold War, a joint British-Russian mission allegedly attempted to revisit the area where the Apollo 17 crew had found the destroyed Soviet craft. This operation, codenamed Akatsuki Alpha, was said to launch from a remote Siberian site. The craft reached lunar orbit in December 1990. What happened next still chills those who've heard the recordings. The controllers on Earth watched as their lander descended toward the surface, telemetry perfect, signals clear. Then, in the middle of the broadcast, the crew's heart rates spiked violently. One shouted something in Russian, the audio cracked with interference. Then came the words no one forgot, "They're coming. They're coming." Moments later, all contact was lost. The monitors showed only static and then silence. Years later, fragments of this footage appeared on the dark web, blurry, corrupted files showing movement in the shadows near the module. Something tall. Thin. Not human. Moving with impossible speed. Governments denied everything, of course. They always do. But why did both NASA and Roscosmos seal so many of their archives immediately afterward? Why were senior mission controllers reassigned or quietly retired within months? Coincidence? Or containment? Meanwhile, strange anomalies continued to be observed on the Moon's surface. Astronomers around the world reported transient lunar phenomena, sudden flashes of light, glowing lines moving across the dark side, and brief pulses as if something beneath was trying to break through. Even NASA's own Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter captured bizarre shapes that looked manufactured. Pillars. Domes. Hexagonal shadows that didn't match the topography. Yet every time such images appeared online, they vanished within hours. Deleted. Replaced. Censored. What are they hiding up there? Some say the truth was first uncovered by accident. In 1969, during Apollo 10, astronauts John Young and Gene Cernan reported hearing outer space music, a strange whistling echo that seemed to come from the surface below. At the time, NASA dismissed it as radio interference. But later audio analysis suggested something else. The sound didn't match any known radio frequency pattern. It was harmonic structured, almost intelligent. Cernan himself once whispered to a reporter off record, "We heard something. It was alive." By the early 2000s, a few brave men began to speak. Former U.S. Army Sergeant Bob Dean claimed NASA destroyed over 40 rolls of Apollo 11 film, images that showed massive alien constructs near the Sea of Tranquility. He called NASA's name a cruel joke, never a straight answer. And then there was Carl Wolf, a U.S. Air Force technician who, in 1965, accidentally saw photographs of what he described as a lunar city, towers, domes, and strange, mushroom-shaped structures on the far side. He was told never to speak of it again. He stayed silent for 36 years. Then, in 2001, he spoke publicly. Weeks later, he was dead. A traffic accident, they said. But many believe otherwise. As the decades rolled on, the Moon remained eerily untouched. No human ever returned. And every proposal to go back, mysteriously cancelled or delayed. What if that's not by accident? What if there's something, or someone, warning us away? One chilling line, supposedly taken from a suppressed Apollo 11 transcript, has haunted investigators for decades. After Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface, during a short, unexplained 2-minute radio blackout, he reportedly spoke over a secondary medical channel, "They're here. They're watching us from the edge of the crater." NASA denied this, of course. Yet multiple sources, including engineers who handled communications, swore they heard it. Armstrong never confirmed it publicly, but years later, at a private conference, a journalist claimed the astronaut's eyes filled with tears when asked if he saw something he couldn't explain. His only reply, "There are things out there that go beyond us." And so, the question remains. Why haven't we gone back to the Moon in over 50 years? Is it really about politics and cost? Or did we simply receive the oldest warning in the universe, do not return? Because maybe, just maybe, the Moon isn't waiting for us. It's watching. For centuries, we gazed at the Moon and believed it was simple, a barren rock, a silent companion drifting through the void. But what if we were wrong, completely wrong? What if the Moon is not what it appears to be? Among the strangest and most unsettling ideas in all of astronomy lies a hypothesis whispered by both scientists and dreamers, the hollow moon theory. A claim so outrageous, so terrifying, that even mentioning it can ruin reputations. Yet, the evidence keeps surfacing. It began with the seismic data. When Apollo 12's crew deliberately crashed their ascent module into the moon's surface, seismometers, instruments they had left behind, picked up a vibration unlike anything scientists had ever seen. The moon didn't simply absorb the shock. It rang. For nearly an hour, it resonated like a bell struck by an unseen hand. NASA scientists were stunned. They expected a dull thud, a short pulse. But what they recorded was a haunting echo, a metallic resonance that refused to fade. One researcher quietly muttered, "It's as if the moon is hollow." The event was repeated, deliberately. During Apollo 13, when the Saturn IV booster impacted the lunar surface, the same thing happened again. This time, the moon rang for almost 3 hours. Metallic. Hollow. Artificial. No one could explain it. NASA's official statement was cautious, clinical, unusual seismic behavior due to the moon's internal composition. But off the record, engineers whispered of something else. One of them allegedly said, "We're hitting a shell, not a sphere." A shell? A shell of what? Some theorists propose that beneath that dusty surface, the gray plains and endless craters, lies not stone, but structure. A vast metallic framework, ancient and cold. Imagine it, a hollow world orbiting our planet, not by accident, but by design. Could the moon itself be a construct, a machine, a vessel, or an outpost left behind by an intelligence far older than humanity? It sounds like madness. Yet, time and again, fragments of data, ancient myths, and modern anomalies all point in the same direction. In 1971, Soviet scientist Mikhail Vasin and engineer Alexander Sherbakov published a daring paper titled, "Is the Moon the Creation of an Alien Intelligence?" They proposed that the moon was an artificial satellite, an ancient spacecraft placed in Earth's orbit millions of years ago. They pointed to impossible coincidences. The moon's size and distance allow it to perfectly eclipse the sun, a 1 in a billion ratio. Its orbit is too precise. Its density too low. Its crust too thin. And then there's the strange fact that the moon's center of mass is shifted toward Earth, as if it's weighted intentionally, like a stabilized satellite. Could that really be a coincidence? But it gets even stranger. Several lunar orbiters, both Soviet and American, have returned photos showing geometric patterns on the far side. Hexagonal ridges. Parallel trenches. Straight lines stretching for miles, too perfect to be natural. In one image, an enormous, tower-like structure casts a shadow 20 miles long. Another shows what looks like the mouth of a tunnel, disappearing into darkness. NASA labeled these features as artifacts of light and perspective. But independent researchers weren't convinced. They enhanced the images. They measured the angles. The symmetry was undeniable. As one investigator said in a hushed interview, "If this is nature, then nature has learned geometry." The hollow moon theory doesn't just rely on science, it echoes through ancient history too. Across civilizations, from Sumerians to Zulu legends, there are stories of a time before the moon. A time when the night sky was dark, when tides were wild and chaotic, before a great round eye appeared to watch over the earth. Zulu shaman Credo Mutwa once told a tale passed down for generations, that the moon was brought here eons ago by the Chitauri, sky beings who hollowed out a planet to serve as a vessel. They used it to control Earth's weather, emotions, and destiny. Myth? Or memory? Let's return to modern evidence. When astronauts orbited the moon, they described it as having a peculiar glow, especially near its dark side, as though light was escaping from beneath the surface. One Apollo 16 pilot even noted a brief flash, like a pulse through glass. NASA called it cosmic reflection, but others believe it was a malfunctioning aperture, a vent. A vent from something inside. Imagine it now, beneath miles of dust and rock, a labyrinth of tunnels, chambers, and massive supports, echoing with ancient silence. Machines dormant for millennia. Structures humming faintly beneath our instruments. What if that's what the Apollo seismometers truly heard, not echoes through rock, but reverberations through hollow metal corridors deep below? The astronauts may have walked across the roof of an ancient starship. And maybe, just maybe, they woke something up. Because in the years that followed Apollo 17, those who worked close to the mission began to change. Engineers quit suddenly. Transcripts vanished. Entire data reels lost. Whistleblowers described dreams, vivid, alien dreams, of lightless tunnels and vast chambers echoing with whispers. One technician wrote in his private journal, "When I close my eyes, I see it. A city beneath the dust. Sleeping." He never worked again. Could it be that humanity's greatest achievement, landing on the moon, was also its greatest mistake? Could we have stumbled onto something ancient, something that watched us before we ever knew what the stars were? And if the moon truly is hollow, then what sleeps within that hollow shell? The evidence keeps growing. The questions keep multiplying. But one truth remains certain. The moon is not silent. It speaks through vibrations, through data, through the fear that lingers in those who went there. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for us to come back. Or warning us to stay away. The deeper you dig, the darker it gets. Every discovery about the moon, every anomaly, every whisper, leads to the same chilling question: what did NASA find and why did they hide it? Because one thing is clear. From the moment the first astronauts touched lunar soil, the silence began. Let's start with the tapes. Between 1969 and 1972, NASA recorded over 700 boxes of raw telemetry, video, and voice transmissions. Every second of the Apollo missions was documented. But when researchers went to review that material decades later, they were gone. Vanished. According to NASA, they were accidentally erased. All 700 boxes. All mission data. All original footage, including the high-definition broadcast of mankind's first steps. Erased? By accident? Experts were stunned. How could the most valuable footage in human history, the one record of our leap into the cosmos, be wiped out? One technician, now retired, broke down in an interview. We were told to destroy duplicate reels. But they weren't duplicates. They were originals. He paused, tears in his eyes. Someone didn't want them seen again. And the missing footage isn't the only mystery. Audio logs from the 2-minute radio blackout during Apollo 11 remain classified to this day. Those missing minutes, that gap in transmission, has haunted every researcher for decades. What did Armstrong and Aldrin see during those 2 silent minutes? One alleged transcript, leaked by a former NASA engineer, suggests they saw something incredible. Armstrong, what was it? What the hell was it? Houston, repeat, Eagle. What's your position? Armstrong, they're watching us from the crater's edge. Houston, silence. The file was marked, Top Secret, Majestic 12. NASA denies its authenticity. But insiders claim it's real, and it's only one of many suppressed communications. Then came the whistleblowers, men and women who risked everything to speak out. One of the first was Ken Johnston, former photo data manager for the Apollo missions. His job was to handle and store the original negatives brought back from the moon. He later claimed that when he submitted these images for archiving, his superiors ordered him to destroy the originals. When he refused, they fired him. Johnston said the photos showed massive artificial structures on the moon, domes, spires, and ruins of impossible size. He described glass-like towers stretching miles into the lunar sky, reflecting sunlight like prisms. When reporters asked for proof, he produced one image, a faint, vertical beam shining above a crater. NASA called it lens flare. But those who saw it in person said otherwise. It was no reflection. Johnston said. It was alive. Another was Donna Hare, a NASA contractor who worked in Building 8 at the Johnson Space Center. She claimed she saw technicians airbrushing objects out of lunar photos, glowing disks, strange shapes hovering above the horizon. When she asked what they were, a supervisor told her bluntly, "You don't need to know." Later, she was warned never to speak of it again. But she did. And within weeks, she lost her clearance. They erased the truth, she said in tears. Just like they erased the stars from their pictures. And then there was Sergeant Carl Wolf, a U.S. Air Force photographic technician. In 1965, he was called to fix a malfunctioning projector at Langley Air Force Base. There, he saw something that changed his life forever. On the screen was a mosaic of the moon's far side, captured by early unmanned probes. But what he saw in the image made his blood run cold. There were structures, he said. Massive buildings, towers, domes, mechanical shapes, not natural. He was told to say nothing. For decades, he stayed silent, until he came forward in 2001 at the National Press Club. 1 month later, he was dead. A traffic accident, they said. But no one believed it. And yet, these people were only the beginning. Over the years, a strange pattern emerged. Those connected to lunar missions, technicians, astronauts, analysts, began to die under mysterious circumstances. Plane crashes. Heart attacks. Suicides, without note or motive. In 1991 alone, 4 former Apollo engineers died within weeks of each other. Each one had expressed plans to speak at an upcoming space symposium about anomalous lunar findings. The symposium was cancelled. But even among astronauts, the silence was deafening. Neil Armstrong, once open, articulate, and proud, withdrew from public life after Apollo 11. For years, he refused interviews. When he finally appeared at a 1994 White House event, his words were cryptic. "We leave you, much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers." Truth's protective layers. Many believe it was his coded message, his warning, that not all was as it seemed. Meanwhile, Buzz Aldrin, his crewmate, made headlines decades later when he claimed to have seen something strange during the Apollo 11 journey. There was something out there, close enough to be observed, he admitted. It wasn't part of the spacecraft. He described a bright object moving beside them, following their trajectory. NASA later claimed it was a piece of detached paneling. But Aldrin's tone told another story. He was shaken. "I know what I saw," he said quietly. And it wasn't debris. Over the years, patterns began to emerge: redacted documents, erased footage, and mysterious silences. Every time someone came close to revealing the truth, the evidence vanished. Computers wiped. Files sealed. Witnesses silenced. It's as if an invisible hand was guarding the secret, not just from the public, but from history itself. And maybe that's the most terrifying part. Because if NASA is hiding something this monumental, then they're not doing it alone. Who has the power to silence nations? Who can make 700 boxes of data vanish without a trace? Who can erase the moon's truth from the face of the earth? Unless, whatever's up there, isn't just beyond our reach, but beyond our control. What if the cover-up isn't about protecting us from panic, but protecting them from discovery? Because maybe, just maybe, the moon doesn't belong to us at all. For 50 years, the moon has been silent. Untouched. Unvisited. A ghost world hanging above us, patient, cold, and waiting. But now humanity is going back. NASA's Artemis program, the long-awaited return to the moon, is preparing to send new astronauts to the very same places where Apollo once walked. They say it's about science. They say it's about inspiration. But some believe it's about something far more urgent and far more terrifying. In 2019, leaked mission planning documents contained a strange annotation beside one landing site. Avoid Crater Taurus Littrow Zone B, restricted area. Restricted? On the moon? Why would there be restricted zones on a world that's supposed to be empty? That same year, an insider from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory claimed that private data from NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter had been locked down. He said the images revealed unexpected energy signatures near the Apollo 17 landing site, signals pulsing from beneath the surface. When questioned about it, he simply said, "It's waking up." Then came Chandrayaan-2, India's lunar mission in 2019. Its lander lost contact just moments before touchdown. Officially, they blamed a navigation failure. But data from amateur radio operators suggested something else: the signal wasn't lost. It was jammed. A strange burst of electromagnetic noise flooded every frequency for exactly 14 minutes, originating from the lunar surface itself. When contact finally resumed, the craft was gone. No wreckage. No debris. Nothing. Since then, other nations have joined the race: China, Japan, the European Space Agency, all sending orbiters, all returning images carefully edited, all speaking in cautious tones. Chinese scientists have reported unexplained heat zones under the moon's south pole, areas emitting radiation unlike anything seen on Earth. When asked, one researcher said off record, "It's not natural. It's power. Power. From inside the moon." But perhaps the most chilling revelation came in 2023. An anonymous NASA engineer, calling himself only Orion, leaked an encrypted folder online titled Lunar. Inside were fragments of mission logs, coded schematics, and a single chilling video clip, allegedly from a secret orbital feed above the dark side. The footage showed something impossible. A massive circular opening, several kilometers wide, slowly sliding open like an iris. Beneath it, a faint blue glow, mechanical, rhythmic, pulsing like the heartbeat of a machine. The clip lasted only 17 seconds before cutting to static. 3 hours later, the file was erased from every mirror site. Orion's account vanished. His IP address, traced to a NASA contractor facility in Florida, was deactivated. No one ever heard from him again. And then came the whispers from inside Artemis. In 2025, during pre-launch testing, telemetry operators reportedly received a transmission, not from Earth, not from their own systems, but from the Moon itself. The signal repeated 3 times in an ancient, slow rhythm, too structured to be random. Its pattern matched the exact pulse rate detected by Apollo seismic instruments 50 years earlier. One engineer described it as a wake-up call. NASA's official response: silence. But those who have seen the data say something else entirely. The Moon is not dead. It's alive, or rather active. Maybe it's a machine. Maybe a vessel. And maybe, after thousands, maybe millions of years, it's beginning to stir. Even the tides have changed slightly, a subtle shift recorded by oceanographers in 2024. They called it gravitational drift. But what if it's not a natural shift at all? What if the Moon is moving? Not by chance, but by will. As Artemis prepares to launch, strange things are happening across the world. Astronomers have reported faint flashes on the Moon's surface, like electric storms under the dust. Radio observatories in Chile have picked up deep-frequency hums coming from the direction of Mare Tranquillitatis. And in one haunting instance, a satellite passing near lunar orbit captured a short burst of sound, low, vibrating, almost like a voice. When amplified, analysts heard a phrase, faint, broken, yet undeniably human. Don't come back. What if that's not a warning from survivors of Apollo, but from something else entirely? Something inside the Moon that remembers us. Because what if Apollo didn't just find ruins or artifacts, but woke up the very thing that sleeps beneath that hollow shell? A presence older than time. Watching. Waiting. And now, as the countdown to Artemis draws near, the question burns brighter than ever. Are we returning to the Moon, or are we walking into its mouth? Is the Artemis mission humanity's next great leap, or its final mistake? The truth has been hidden, erased, buried in the dust of a world that was never truly ours. But soon, whether NASA likes it or not, we'll find out. Because once Artemis lands, the silence will break. And whatever stirs beneath that surface will finally awaken. We are returning to the Moon, said NASA's administrator at a press briefing. We are going back to stay. But perhaps he doesn't understand what those words truly mean. Because maybe, just maybe, the Moon has been waiting for that exact phrase all along.